tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what that was like?
Well, I grew up in until I was, nice family life. Um, but when I started going to school, my first year at school, um, that's when I realized that something wasn't right because the non-Jewish children would, call me names or do even nasty things at school, like if I had long braids, put my braids in the inkwell or things like that. Teacher wouldn't stop them. But I don't remember exactly how long I was in a public school. I don't think it was more than a year. And then Jewish children were not allowed in public schools anymore. And from then on, I went to school in the basement of our synagogue. And as a matter of fact, about 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more, we had a reunion of some of the people in my class, and I really didn't remember any of them. I don't really remember any details even of the school itself or the teachers. Some of the others did remember, they were a little older. But I really remember very little except that I had to go to school by trolley car and then had a long walk. And I really was not aware outside of, people calling us names on the street or somewhere. I didn't know what was going on until it came that I was leaving with my parents to go to Italy. And the reason for that was because my father, who was a pharmacist, and his father they lost the pharmacy. Well, my grandfather passed away when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And my father was running the business, and apparently, as far as I know, it was taken away from him. It was confiscated. So he had no way of earning a living. So at that time, it was my parents, my older brother by 3 years, myself, and my paternal grandmother. My father had an older brother, but I don't know whether he was still in Königsberg when we left. And my brother stayed behind with my grandmother, and I was given to believe that the reason he stayed behind with my grandmother was he wanted to finish the school year before joining us in Italy, because he would have to learn a new language. And my grandmother didn't want to leave because she felt she was old and things would get better. Unfortunately, she ended up in Theresienstadt concentration camp where she perished. And my brother just made it out in time with a children's transport to England, where he went into a foster home of some English people. And it was about 26 years, I think it was, before we saw each other again. Meanwhile, in Italy, my parents and I, we moved to Genoa, and we could take our household goods with us, apparently, but apparently not any money or a very limited amount of money. I really don't know exactly. So I was made to understand that the only way to get some money out of Germany was my parents bought a bakery in Genoa. And what did they know from a bakery? My father was a pharmacist and my mother was a housewife. But they tried very hard, they worked very hard, and due to the fact that they really couldn't take care of me, starting this new business, they left me at a children's home. It was a lovely place, but I was really miserable because this was a new language, and I was had turned 10, and I was the youngest there, and my parents went there, and I did not like it.
Were you
So
able to visit with them while you were there?
this was not in Genoa. This was somewhere outside of Genoa. It was not that close where, I don't remember ever that they came to see me or that I was able to go see them until they came and got me, and I went with them to the apartment where they were staying in Genoa. And again, I had to go to school at a synagogue. And I still actually remember very little about everyday life. And actually, I didn't realize until many, 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 many years later how traumatized I must have been, because there are lots and lots and lots of blanks. I just can't remember. So as far as I know, I did what I had to do, what a youngster does. And my parents left early to go bakery and came home late, and they had some help, Italian lady who cleaned and did dishes and things like that. Then my mother got very sick. She was sick for 6 months. At first she was home, and then she was in a hospital. And she died when I was 12, 3 months before my 13th birthday. Things had gotten real bad again at that time, because at that time the Germans and the Italians became allies. And again, my father lost the store, and my mother was dying. And it was a really bad time. And after my mother died, about 3 months later, meanwhile, we moved out of the apartment, and I helped my father pack up stuff. I remember that. And we went to live in the home of an Italian lady. We just had like a rented room. And then I still was going to school at the synagogue. And one day I came home from school, and I was met by a friend who told me that my dad had been caught in a raid and to round up Jews and was put in jail, and that I should put some overnight essentials in a little suitcase, and I should take it to the jail. And to this day, I do not remember how I managed to do that, but I must have, because the only thing I remember was that I got to the police station and they took whatever container I had with my father's things and looked through them and took out his razor and little scissors and said, "He doesn't need that." And they said, "Go." And that's all I remember. I don't remember how I got there. Did I go by streetcar? Did I go by bus? Did I walk? I have no recollection, except that that now I was alone.
12 years old, 13. Completely alone.
12, I was still 12. And he was in prison just a few days, couple of days, 2-3 days. And then all the people that they had taken prisoners that time were let go and were told to get out of the country in a very short period of time. I believe it was 2 weeks, but I might be wrong. But there was no place to go. So some people went into hiding, other people fled to France illegally. And that's what my father decided to do. And that had to be done. Some fishermen would do that. You had to pay them for whatever, because it was dangerous, and they had to do it at night. And all my father had was a knapsack on his back, and just enough money to pay the French government. The French government, if you made it, would let you stay, but you had to pay a certain amount of money, and I don't know what that amount was. So that's all he had, and he did make it to France. I had a very meager existence, had to be supported by Jewish organizations. But coming back to me, the reason I did not go with him was these friends of my parents, or just of my father at the time, I don't know, I guess of my parents. It was a young couple. He was a physician, Dr. and Mrs. Kleiman. And everybody wanted to come to the United States. So everybody tried very hard. Everybody had quota numbers, and it took a lot of time, because the United States would only let so many people in and no more. And so we all had proceedings going about coming to the United States. And our quota number was very close, apparently, to the quota number of the claimants. And the claimants said, since I already had some relatives here in the United States that had just been able to get out, my maternal grandparents and my mother's brother, that they would, that my father shouldn't take me with him because it was so dangerous. And they would be willing to bring me with them to the United States when we were ready to get out.
Do you want to go?
And, well, yes, I wanted to go because my grandparents were there. Of course, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't remember my feelings exactly about my father leaving 3 months after my mother passed away and leaving me with people I really didn't know. And but on the other hand, they were going to bring me to the United States. So I continued staying in this lady's, where we had the rented room, and went to, for meals, I went to where the claimants, who were also staying in some kind of a rented room. And so they were more or less, looking after me. And then we were just about ready. There was a lot of difficulties, and I don't remember details about my papers and things. But then we were finally ready to leave and had places on board ship. And 4 days before we were going to leave, war broke out. Harbor was closed, no more ships leaving. And we were stuck. So the few weeks I was supposed to have been with the claimants turned into 4 years. And what happened to us then was in Italy, they separated families where they put the young males into concentration camp. They didn't have the facilities that they had in Germany. And basically, the Italian people are very kind people, very nice people. So Dr. Kleinman went to concentration camp, and Mrs. Kleinman and myself and I don't exactly remember how this was done, but we were all collected somehow, and we were put on a train. Women and children were separated from the men, and the young man. And we were sent to a small city called Potenza in southern Italy. And actually what they did with us, we were interned. We were not behind barbed wire, but we had to stay in the city, or later on we were in another town, and couldn't leave the boundaries of the city. We had to report to the police every day. We were not allowed, the adults were not allowed to work. Children were not allowed to go to school. So I was the Klymans felt I needed to learn something, so they had me apprenticed to a seamstress, so I should learn how to sew and, you know, and life just went on. It wasn't easy, but it went on. But the thing is that Mrs. Kleiman was pregnant and she had difficulties, and so the Kleimans asked the Italian government if, since Mrs. Kleiman had difficulties and Dr. Kleiman was a physician, could he come and stay with us? And it was granted. So he came out of camp, and he
What
he
camp
was
he in?
into, I don't remember.
Okay, it's okay.
And he came, and he, from then on, he was with us. And then from Potenza, we were moved again. I don't remember how long we were in Potenza, but we were moved again to a small town called Tito. And this was out in a rural area, very rural area, very primitive. We had electricity, but we had no running water, and we had we had to get an Italian woman to bring us the water, which they kept in like barrels, like you have these big beer barrels, and they had like pegs on the wall inside of the house, and they'd have to go to the town square, to the pump, and fill the barrel, and then bring it and put it on those pegs, and then it had like a spout, you know, where you could get the water out. We had to learn to manage a wood-burning stove, which none of us had done before. I had to,
By this time, what did you understand was happening everywhere? What had you heard? Nothing from the underground, nothing from rumors or anything like that. So you had no idea what was happening everywhere else.
none.
Were there Germans?
Except, oh, there were German soldiers everywhere.
And you never heard any rumors about the camps and, I mean, the actual final
No, the
solution?
death camps, no. And I will show you from my father. I have, well, I don't know, as a child, I just kind of lived from day to day, did what I had to do.
You're 12 years old and lost your mother and your father. You're sent to live with people you really didn't know. The entire country had gone what obviously must have seemed insane. There was anti-Semitism everywhere. How are you surviving?
Well, like I was saying, I guess we were lucky we were in Italy. The Italian people generally are very kind people, no matter how poor. When we were in this town, Tito, and we stayed in this room, we all stayed in one room. We had, like I said, there was no running water, so we had like an indoor outhouse, so to speak. everything was very primitive, and we had all kinds of bugs, fleas, lice, rats, mice, something you couldn't escape. But generally, the people were very poor. These were country people, and if they had a little something, they would share it with you. But people would come after dark, and they would ask, you know, if something was bothering them, and see if, you know, Dr. Kleiman could help them or suggest or do something for them. And they would, you know, they would bring us some vegetables or whatever they were growing, and so it was hard, but we never went really, really hungry. But like I've mentioned before, German soldiers were everywhere, and we had some hair-raising experiences. One of them was that the main road, it's not like you have highways now, the main roads would go right through a village, go on through the mountains, and then go to the next village, go through that village, and keep on going. And there was one road. So the soldiers or the convoys and everything, they would come down this road, through this town and beyond, and go through the next town. And the Allied forces came up from Sicily, from the southern part of Italy, and worked their way up. And of course, the Germans were fighting them, and they were fighting the Germans, and we saw, you know, convoys be blown up on the road, but they never bombed right into where people were living. They waited till they were out, you know, past the town, out in the open. And one day there was a knock on the door, and here stood these German soldiers. And here's Dr. Kleiman. He looks so German Jewish. He couldn't be looking any more German Jewish. He is very blonde. He has a hook nose, has a high forehead. I mean, you couldn't mistake him for anything else. And these soldiers speak to him in German, and, you know, told him that the townspeople told him he was a doctor, and they had a badly injured officer, and could he come and see what he could do for him? Well, we were scared to death. He went with them, and we thought he's not going to come back. But he did. What happened? He did the best he could for the officer, but he told us later that, you know, he wasn't going to survive. But he did the best he could, and these soldiers said, "Well, is there anything we can do for you?" And he said, "Yeah, if you have some food, we would appreciate it." So meanwhile, though, while he was with them, Mrs. Kleiman and I and their little boy, we went out in the mountains. We went hiding because we thought, you know, they take him, they're going to come back and take us. But he did come back, and believe it or not, they did give him some rations. And that was one experience that was scary, but turned out to be okay.
There were some survivors who tell stories of maybe acts of kindness might be too nice, but acts of humanity. Would you, when you see this kind of a story, where you experience this kind of a story, do you believe that these may have been Nazis? may not
Well,
have.
I don't believe that all German soldiers were Nazis. I believe that they were just soldiers. Like, I don't know if Eric has a different, right now he's tired, a different thought on that, but if they were really Nazis, and if they really had, I mean, they knew who we were. There was no question. Why would we be where we were? In a little town, a miserable little
There was
town.
no
And
mention of Jews or anything like that. They came in looking for a doctor,
they came looking for a doctor.
not necessarily a Jew.
Right.
But how were you to know? How are you to know?
Right.
Right, I understand.
So,
Tell me, now, but this is about what time now? This is yours, about 13?
no, I'm older than that.
You'd been with
I'm
them for 4
already,
years, so you
yeah,
maybe
well, I
15,
was,
16
yeah,
years old.
yeah,
The war was already underway,
right.
and by this time,
And-
had you heard anything about camps or people leaving and never coming back? And
I
wondering-
didn't, and if I did, I don't
You don't
remember.
remember?
And I don't know if the Climans did or didn't.
They never talked to you about it?
Because I don't remember even seeing a newspaper.
Did you stay in touch
or
with the Clemens?
radio. Yeah, they're here, they're in New York. They're in the 90s.
And they're still alive.
Yeah, they're in the 90s.
Tell me
Setting it
about
up.
liberation and, tell me about liberation and moving and.
Well,
and-
okay, now let me tell you this. When the Allied forces came up Italy and got as far as our village and went beyond, we were automatically free, but we had no place to go. And since nobody had been able to work or earn a living, we were given a very minimal amount of money from the government that you couldn't really live on. But we even had ration cards like the Italian people had, and Mrs. Kleiman would exchange like something that the Italian people didn't need off a lot for something that we maybe wanted sugar and give you flour, or wanted this and exchange it for something else.
Right.
But what happened was that after the Allied forces passed us, they, this man, this older man who was also interned in our village, went to, I think it was Bari, a city not too far away. And he wanted to see if he could find a job or drum up some business. I believe he used to be a furrier or something like that. And he sees these soldiers with the British Army, but they're from Palestine. They have the Mogen David on their sleeve, sitting in front of a cafe. And so he joined them, and they got to talking about, did they have anybody in Italy and so on. So, well, one of them happened to be my mother's first cousin. I did not know he existed. And he had been looking for my father and me, as they went along Italy. They had not gone as far yet as Genoa, where we had been, which
Right.
is further north. And when this man heard that, he says, well, I know where the daughter is. So next thing you know, he comes. And he introduces himself to me, telling me who he was. And And he brought us also rations and, you know, did whatever he could for us. And then he asked me, he said, would you like to go to Palestine and maybe be with my wife until the war is over and then, you know, try to get to the United States? And I said, okay. I mean, I was, you know, I had no direction. And so he said, okay. He said, I think I might be able to manage to get you there. And I almost did. And at that time was when President Roosevelt had decided to bring 1,000 refugees over to this country for the duration of the war. And of course, everybody jumped at that chance. And there's a book that's written about this whole thing. And about 3,000 people applied, and they would only take 1,000. So the Klymans applied for themselves and me together. And we were refused. And supposedly because it was thought that maybe because Dr. Kleiman was still young enough to be, you know, Army age, military age. And so what they did then, they reapplied just for me because I really wasn't part of their family. And I was accepted on the condition that somebody that was also accepted and going would be willing to be my guardians. I was 17. And so this older couple agreed to that. And then, of course, there's the whole story about my coming here and
That's what I
to
had
camp.
written down,
And
right? That's what I have written down, right? If I remember correctly, I
yeah.
have that.
Yeah,
Tell me,
and
what brought you to Tennessee?
my husband, a sleepyhead. No, he took some medication. He got tired.
It's okay. What brought you here, though? Your husband? So did you
Well,
meet him
he
in
was.
New York?
No, we met after I got out of camp. I was at camp for a year and a half. And then when we...
Where was that?
Oswego, New York.
Oh, okay. That was, sure, I know that story.
And there's the book. I'm in it.
There was a film of that too. Did you see
There
that?
was a mini-series that was lousy.
Okay, that was, yeah, that's what
There was a
Don't watch
mini-series.
that.
That mini-series,
Yeah.
that was not...
I think there was a documentary too that was better.
Well, the mini-series was not a documentary.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was...
Dramatization.
I mean, some parts were correct, but no. But in any case, was at the camp for a year and a half. And then meanwhile, my maternal grandfather had passed away. But I had my maternal grandmother and my uncle and this cousin's parents, my great aunt and great uncle. And they, due to the fact that my cousin was in the military, he was able to let his parents in the United States know that he had found me. And I have that picture there on my board. And when I came out of camp, of course, I went to Rochester, which isn't far from Oswego. And I went to stay with my grandmother, sounds with my grandmother, where my grandmother was staying. She had a rented room in the home of a Jewish people, and they were kind enough to let me have a room too. And
You were
for
how old
that,
right now?
Well, I was
18,
18, almost 19. I had, no, I was 18. And of course, so I was in Rochester, and I went to high school in Rochester, finished high school. Then I went to practical nursing, went into practical nursing, and that took a year, and I did that. And then this cousin's parents always kept on telling me, you just got to go and meet some young people. You got to go meet some young people. There is a group at the Jewish Community Center of, people your age. Go to, their meetings. So one day I finally did go. I was very shy, and Eric happened to be the president of the group at the time. So,
So you met and
but
fell in love.
yeah,
And how long have you been married?
53 years.
53 years.
Yeah, we have 4 children, all married, 7 grandchildren, and rebuilding the family. But really and truly, all along this time, I didn't know what was going on. No idea.
Go ahead.
Fascinated about the time of your life when you were in Italy, and were you aware of others in your town who were in a similar situation as you?
Well, I knew of all the internees that were there. And it wasn't just Jews that were internees. I became quite friendly. There was an Italian family, and he was a political prisoner, so to speak.
Did you ever read Carlo Levi's book?
Hmm?
Did you ever read a book by Carlo Levi? Primo Levi? Cristo si è fermato a Italy?
No.
It's a similar, he's a political attorney who,
Yeah.
basically, these towns were so primitive, they were,
Oh,
it was like sending you to a jail,
terrible,
you couldn't get out.
terribly primitive,
I mean,
terribly
They didn't
primitive.
have to build camps, they just sent you to.
I mean, I
separate
washed clothes in the river, and I mean,
There was no transportation, there was no
no,
civilization,
no,
communication.
very, very primitive. But there was the Italian family, like I was saying, they're such good people, no matter dirt poor. And they were saying, oh, it says, don't worry, it says if the Germans come, we'll just tell them you're one of our children. Here I didn't look at all like any of their children. I was blonde with long braids, and here they were all dark, But, they were willing, and if they had a platter of pasta where they all ate out of one platter of pasta, the whole family, from toothless grandpa to the baby, they all ate from this one platter. We were, I wouldn't, but we were invited to, they're really good-hearted people. And I think that saved a lot of lives because there were, Italians were really...
There are really great stories about
Yeah.
the Italians and what they did for the Jews, similar to
Yeah.
the Danish, and it's always
Yeah.
heartwarming at that time.
Yeah.